Hello there, it's Zoe. Welcome back to the show. My question for you this week is, how might we improve our thinking as leaders? Let's find out. On Planet Human this week, I read a really interesting article to help new technology that can help with diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. So let me put on my smart glasses. And it's all about the research of how the brain in its neuroplasticity can adapt to external stimulation, as in little electronic shocks. So yes, we're going back to shocking people's brains. It is called transcranial alternating current stimulation, or neuromodulation. And what the researchers found is that if they apply a small amount of electrical currents to the brain, it changes how the brain responds to things like learning and navigating space. And it can help with memory and restore and improving the learning. So there's some really amazing tangible outcomes for this. And it has applications for diseases like depression, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. So why I think this is interesting for us as leaders is it kind of reminds me is you are what you think. Your environment matters. So not only do we have to be careful in what we immerse ourselves in, because basically this research is saying we adapt to our environment. And in this case, stimulating with electrical currents helps us to get a new kind of environment. So it applies to what we're reading, what we're thinking, who we're hanging out with. And when all that fails and you still can't find some change, paddle your brain and get some zaps happening. Well, on Planet Zoe, I'm back in the groove, back in Australia. At least I'm projecting that's where I will be, because I'm pre-recording this intro and this episode before I actually leave to go overseas. So I'm kind of crystal balling what that might look like for me. And I'm imagining that I am really working hard on power games. We're well into the edits now. We're going into the proofs, and I'm building up the other things associated with the book, like the workshops and the board game, which should be fun, I'm hoping. What if and how might we improve our strategic thinking? I know this is a really useful, practical insight and strategy for leaders, because all of the leaders I work with want to improve the strategic thinking of their teams, not often of their own selves, which I think is a little bit of poor self-awareness, because we can all improve our strategic leadership thinking. In terms of my recommendations for how you might go about doing that, and my guest has his own recommendations, we'll come to that shortly, is I like to think about improving your strategic thinking by thinking far, deep, and wide. This was a central premise in my book, People Stuff. And thinking far means extending your time horizons. How much further can you go into the past to look at the patterns and trends of activities that have brought us to the current place? That helps extend our thinking about meta context, if you like, and it gives us more wisdom when we apply to what's happening next. And we can think about time horizons moving into the future as well, as how much further into the future can you think? Usually strategic planning is 1 to 3 years. What about 10 to 20 generations into the future? It changes the scope of what we're doing and how we think about our legacy, our contribution, and the impact of our work. So that's the first part, thinking far into the future and far into the past. Going deep, it means going deep into analyzing what the current situation looks like. That means looking at doing things like environmental scanning, doing a systems map, doing an iceberg map of looking at what are the causal layered analysis underneath the surface of those kinds of things that we're saying, doing a problem tree. You can Google all that to get an insight on how to do all that. So that's going deep. Go deep below the surface. Don't just go for Band-Aid solutions. And the third thing is thinking wide. And wide is managing the ripple effect of our actions. And I use a future consequence wheel for that. So what is the first order level of consequences for whatever decision we make, both positive and negative? And then asking, well, what's the consequence of that consequence? So looking at the knock-on effect. When we do that ripple effect, knock-on effect, and draw it, map it out, it gives us a really good analysis of what could potentially happen. And are we prepared for those consequences? Are we prepared to own them and to wear them and to deal with them? Thinking far, deep, and wide is essentially how you can fast track, upscale, deepen, broaden, improve your strategic thinking. Go and do it. Well, it's time for tea time in the office kitchen. And my guest today is Dave Martin. Dave is a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. He's a four-time CEO of different tech companies. He's an author and coach to CEOs, and he's crafted this wonderful little book called Mega Thinking. And he wanted to put forward an easy way of deepening and improving our strategic thinking. So without further ado, here's Dave, all the way from Saratoga, California. Welcome to the show, David Martin.
Thank you.
Well, we have lots to cover. And I love this topic of mega thinking. It's very meta in terms of its concept of mega. But what does that actually mean? You've written a whole book about it. What does mega thinking actually mean?
It tries to bring up the thought that thinking itself is the most important thing in one's life. It keeps us alive. It takes care of us day by day, and it also allows us to tackle more complex subjects of thinking, like raising children, running a business, writing a book, whatever the topic is. And so the theme is mega thinking, or great thinking can be achieved by using a process that discovers the mega steps or greatest thoughts on a topic. So the topic can be anything, something like I said, becoming a best mother for a teenager, or something complex like running a complex business, or peace in the Middle East. Pick anything you want. It provides a vehicle, a process, so that you can actually find the 10 or fewer greatest thoughts on those topics. And once you find those, your ability to think about the topic and make decisions relating to the topic goes up significantly. It sounds simple, but many people don't think structurally like that. They don't think in an organized fashion. And since I'm a first-time author, and yet I've used this principle, this concept of megasteps, since I was a freshman in college, and I've just written my first book. I wanted to take that thesis, 10 or fewer greatest thoughts on a topic, and find examples in the world that kind of prove that that thesis is valid. And so the research we did was to take three subject areas, the 7 largest religions of the world, the 8 major forms of government in the world, and the 3 major branches of science. And we said, let's research those and find if the authorities on each of those different subjects came up with 10 or fewer major concepts, major greatest thoughts on those. And lo and behold, all 18 have that. Every one of those ones I mentioned have 10 or fewer. I mean, example in Christianity and Judaism is the 10 Commandments. Mm-hmm. If you read and study the 10 Commandments and really take them in and understand what they're saying, not just one sentence, but really digging into them, then you have the greatest thoughts about Christianity. Not that Christianity doesn't have additional facets to it, but those will allow you to wade further into the religion and read books on it, and read the Bible and so on, and provide a framework for thinking. And again, that every one of those that I mentioned, in the U.S., the Democratic Republic, in its Constitution in 1776, came up with the Bill of Rights, which is the 10 principles of governance of people and people's rights in the United States. And that has held its own forever, for 250 years. Again, that's 10 greatest thoughts on the idea of the U.S. form of a democratic republic. So that's the thesis of the book, and the book develops how, in a simple form, 4 steps, you can find the greatest thoughts on any topic. And to facilitate knowledge, understanding of that actually working, I took 6 real people on 6 very different topics and said, please use the mega step process, the 4 steps, and see what you end up with as your greatest thoughts on those topics. And those 6 are how to become the best parent to a teenager, how to pick your college major for the best impact on your career, how to develop stronger interpersonal skills, which is an incredibly important thing in life, interpersonal skills, how to understand AI, since AI is becoming so ubiquitous and scary to some people, how to become a better leader, and how to figure out how to solve one of the world's greatest health problems, which is in healthcare, in medicine, the third largest form of death in the world is medical errors.
So can I just check something with you, please, Dave? So if I've understood this correctly, the mega sept idea is, how do we go about thinking about a topic to boil it down to core key principles, ideas around that particular topic, things that stay true and from which everything else kind of bolts onto it around that topic. And what I want to check with you before we get into some awesome examples that you listed there are, what are the specific 4 steps that showcase the mega sept way of thinking?
So your brain is sort of like a computer, and I'll then explain the 4 steps. And a computer model that's been valid for 75 years and continues to be valid today, including with new technologies like AI, is a box, and coming in the left side of the box is input, and going out the right side of the box is output, and then at the bottom of the box is storage or memory, and the middle of the box is processing. Mm-hmm. And that basic model has been valid forever, and still is today. And if you take the brain and say that's the processing, so much of what people think they're thinking is a lot of input, maybe a little bit of storage and memory, and a lot of output, but not a lot of thinking in between. And so what the 4 steps are designed to do is focus on making your brain, that processing element, work the way it really needs to think. And the first and most important, which is really kind of funny when you think about it, is before you pick your topic and make the topic very specific. I want to know how to become the best mother for my teenage children. Okay. That's the topic. The first thing you do is, before you talk to anybody, before you look on the internet and Google search, or now do a ChatGPT search for that topic, because you have so much in your brain already of thinking, memory about that, because you've been trying to do it for a few years, write down the 10 or fewer greatest thoughts that you think about that are the most important to think about to be a parent of a teenager. So the first step is simply to get your brain thinking, to be able to write something down formally and be able to look at it. And that sounds crazy.
This is about a retrieval process out of that, as I'm thinking about the diagram you did of the brain and that little sort of memory cache over there. It's mining your own personal memory cache to get those ideas out. That's step one.
And exactly. And the memory cache is enormous. Depending on how old you are, you can go back 50 years and remember, a date you had with a girlfriend. Your memory cache is infinite, virtually. So it's a matter of extracting out and then forcing yourself to think about, what does that mean and how important is that, and that sort of thing. So that's step one. Step two is a simple one, but it's kind of the first step in what I call participative leadership. So now you're a leader, you're a mother leader trying to be a better leader of your children. And so the second step is to socialize your original thoughts. And you pick people that are a combination of maybe someone you admire who's a good mother to teenagers already, or maybe somebody that's a grandmother and was really good to their children growing up. You pick up two, three, not 50, not one, two or three, maybe four, and without guiding them to your original thinking, which you wrote down and you have in your head and you have written down on a piece of paper, ask them the same identical question. What are your greatest thoughts on becoming the best mother to a teenager? And it's amazing what you'll get out of those two, three, four chats is brand new thinking, different than yours, and it will stimulate you to say, okay, that's great input, thank you. You then hand them your original thoughts because you're giving and you're getting, and they enjoy that because they're learning something. And then you go back and update your greatest thoughts based on that socializing step.
David, I'm curious about this particular step. So probably when I read through your book, I had the most questions around this particular step. And part of them were like, okay, who do you select? And you mentioned for the example of if you're a mother trying to be a good mother to teenage parents, you pick somebody you admire who is a good mother as a good role model. If it's something professional, like how do you improve your interpersonal skills, that other example you gave, what other qualifications, like what other filters do we need to put on our selection of people? That's my first question around that. So can you explore that a little bit for me, please?
I think words about these socializing people, where you can say genuine respect, they listen, general qualities that go beyond a simple topic of how to become the best mother to teenagers. I think that's a step. And in the case of business, you always want to get input from people that you respect, that you know that they may have different views on things than you, but that's actually good. And knowing that, you can say, I'm going to get some new information that bears on becoming better at interpersonal skills. So it's not a quantitative scientific step that you can perfect to 100% hit. But judgment, we all have judgment of people. We all have experiences with people. And since this isn't trying 50 people that you trust and respect, it's find a few that you do, because you're just trying to get a new dose of input on the topic. I know that doesn't exactly answer your question, but
No,
I
it
would
does.
call just you. Yeah.
You're basically
Okay.
saying there's no explicit criteria. It's more general criteria of somebody you respect, they respect you, they're good listeners, and you're looking for more stimulation into your thinking.
Better said than I said it. You just said it better than I did.
So I'm also curious about this particular step, because there are some limitations to that, and I see two limitations, or maybe even three. One is the courage to actually ask people to talk about the topic, because sometimes the topic is intimidating. B, it's who do you know? And some people don't have a wide network, and that can be a constraint. And three is you might be bringing your biases to the selection of the people that you ask questions of. And so I'm wondering if you have any recommendations for seeking diversity of thought, diversity of perspective. Now, you did say somebody who disagrees with you would be a good person to talk with. Apart from that distinguishing diversity criteria, are you concerned at all with, at this stage of the mega thinking process, of cognitive biases coming to play and being too exclusive as opposed to inclusive in who you're selecting?
No.
Hey.
Again, I put a big word on picking those two, three, four people. It's your judgment. If you literally have a topic where you have no one in your a group of friends, family, other people you can reach out to that you feel have any relevance or you have any access to on the topic, that's kind of a big problem. I think one of the side benefits of the process, especially on this one, is that it causes you to reach out in a way that very few people do comfortably. It's a very important topic to you. I want to be a better mother to my teenage kids. And maybe you haven't talked about that. Maybe you've had some things that you didn't want to express about that. And if you can find those two, three, four, and reach out to them, it kind of builds a whole new relationship that is good. I don't have any advice for if if there's a mother of teenagers that has no other mothers or fathers, parents or grandparents that she respects and trusts for input. I don't have any answer for that problem. That maybe requires just jumping to step three.
Okay. So what is step three?
Well, step three is so now you have a synthesized, not just your original thinking. You have that, but you have a synthesized with two, three, four other people thinking on the same topic, and it's a new list because it's better because you listened and you know they had some good ideas. And so now very selectively do some basic research. You know, in the last 20 years, we've been blessed with the internet, search engines. You don't have to go to the library. You don't have to go to, you know, Encyclopedia Britannica. You can get access in a very focused way on different topics like teenagers, parenting teenagers. And so the tighter you can make the search, the better. But now, more powerfully than ever, with ChatGPT and other AI instantiations that exist, you can really nail it down and iterate and get some really good additional thoughts from the world, from the infinite internet. And so that's step three. And it's purposefully don't go out and try to find 50 different articles or research groups. Just use your logic to say, if I really focus the question or the search or the ChatGPT question in a careful way, I'm going to get some additional input, and that in itself becomes the third step of the process that you can now synthesize that down into the final list. It's not a perfect process. It's not a complex process. It can go very quickly. The mother that did the teenage chapter in the book that we mentioned, it took a few hours. You know, I mean, of total time. You know, an hour to write her thoughts and an hour or two to get some input from some respected friends on the topic, and then the research step is very quick. And so down to the bottom, the fourth step is you write your final thoughts, megaceps or greatest thoughts on the topic, and then you make that sacred until the next time you have a better thought on the topic. And one way to do that is, it sounds stupid, but you put that thing on your mirror in the bathroom, you put it into your computer and into your iPhone. In that particular example, you talk to kids about it and share your thoughts and get their thoughts. You ask them to also, you know, think about those same greatest thoughts. And then over time, you will further refine those thoughts. Now, if you take that list and compare it to the Ten Commandments and its testing over time, they don't quite compare, but it doesn't matter. That list on step 4 is going to be the best thoughts you have right now, and you didn't have those before you took the process. They were either vagaries or they weren't clear, but now it's black and white, what you have deemed to be the greatest thoughts on that topic. And again, you can take it to the other ones in the book and any other subject. It sounds stupid, but peace in the Middle East is impossible, right? Some people think. Partly it's impossible because the greatest thoughts that bear on why there isn't peace in the Middle East haven't been captured in a uniform way and shared with all those parties that need to think about them. And I know that's way off the deep end in terms of probability, but it applies to anything.
Okay. So I have a bundle of questions. I'll try and slow down and ask one at a time. And the first one is bringing ChatGPT and AI, generative AI, into the conversation is really interesting for me, because listening to this process, you said the slow part is actually you have to slow down a little bit in this process. One is to capture your own thoughts, and two, talk to people. That's the slow part, apparently. It can also, the next step, step 3, is do the research, can also be slow, because you can do it aside from ChatGPT. You can go into reading books and magazine articles and YouTube snippets. Like, depending on how engrossed in the topic you are, you can go long and hard on all of that. And circling back to the point about ChatGPT, I want to ask you about, is there a danger, which I find myself sometimes wondering if I'm relying too much on ChatGPT, to skip those first 2 steps and just go, right, ChatGPT, can you give me the 7 top principles of how to be a great mom, or how we can find peace in the Middle East, and just let it synthesize its access to the internet and come up with the tenets? How do you counter that?
I think that's a huge problem and risk that's going to be compounded by the new technologies. That also existed when you put in some search item into Google and you came back with 50 links. Where do you begin? I think the blessing of search, the internet, all the data available, and the blessing of AI and ChatGPT and the like is that it can go out and look at a huge amount of data and come back with a discrete list. I think the last thing you want to do in this process is to say, I have 3 books that have been recommended to me on being a better parent to teenagers, and I'm going to read all 3 and then write them down. You don't need that. We have the blessing now that a lot of this can be synthesized by non-humans, search engines and ChatGPT. But the reason it's a risk is going back to the computer model and input, output, memory, and processing. The more input you have, like drinking from a fire hose, the more you tend not to even comprehend how to process it. And all of a sudden, out the other side comes the fire hose. It just output. If you take some very controversial topics in the world, governments, politics, that sort of stuff. And we just went through an election in the U.S. for president that was, in all my life of voting, the most confrontational and disturbing I've ever seen. That idea of infinite input, very little processing, and infinite output, which basically said if you're told this, then the output's going to be the same, and that's going to be your opinion without thinking about it. So the point you're raising is very, 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 very valid today, and it could get worse and worse, because you can basically get, if you want, infinite input, and that's not what you want. You want to filter. Again, the potential is that ChatGPT, for example, can be that filter if you tighten the lens enough.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm still wondering about the individual leader sitting there going, well, my 2 options are spend a few hours talking to people and thinking about it myself, and then leveraging technology, or just leveraging technology. Which will I opt for? And you kind of have to sell the benefit of the human brain versus the computer brain. And I'm hearing your argument about what we don't want is just too much input, like excessive input, because that crowds the thinking. It's an incredible balance to try and formulate how we go about doing this. And that whole process of thinking for yourself and talking to other humans before you go to technology is a bit of a slow down to speed up kind of thing.
Very well said, and it's one of the challenges of our future, and it's already been a challenge. I remember growing up and having to write a book report or something, and I would, you know, if it was a topic like the history of World War II, I would go to encyclopedia and look up the history of World War II, and that was the sole input. Well, now if you put into ChatGPT, give me everything I don't need to know about World War II, you'll be overrun. So it's both a blessing and a challenge, just the way you said it. By the way, this first step, which sounds stupid, but so many of the people that I coached, I was a CEO of 4 companies, and then I retired when I was 44, and then I decided to coach other CEOs of companies and boards of directors and that like. So I became a coach, and the total number of people that I touched over decades was a few hundred, 20 to 30 CEOs, 6 or 7 board members, 8 or 10 leaders that worked for the CEO. And I'm amazed at how many of them didn't start with their own brain and thoughts and get those thought through before they go out and start saying, I want a recommendation on this, and or give me data on that. Or it sounds stupid, but it really, really is true. A lot of very good leaders and some who aren't so good just don't think enough. Some of it's very psychological. Zoe. So if you're at that position of leadership, and this could be true if you're, a very confident father of kids, or if you're a great medical expert in healthcare. It's true of any kind of leader, and that is you develop a self-confidence and a view that I've been there, done that. I just repeat what I've done, or don't confuse me with the facts. My mind's already made up, or I don't need anybody's input on anything. I know what to do. So it's almost a psychological complexity that causes some leaders to not think, and that's at a societal level. That's where the horrible amount of just opinions that just flow around, and there's very little thinking. There's a very, very wonderful field that was developed at universities, including my university, Princeton in New Jersey, U.S., and it's around truth seeking. And there's a famous professor, PhD, that's written a bunch of articles and held seminars and the like on in the sea of opinions that are all over the place, and some just thrust on you. How could you possibly think any other way than this way? How do you sift through that? And what he does is he's pretty conservative. His name is Robbie. And he picked a very, very liberal other person who has very different opinions. And they actually go live in front of audiences, and they throw out a topic and they talk about it. And they both walk away at the end of the topic having asked questions, listened, and thought with better knowledge about the topic than they thought going in. So I know I'm going off the deep end, but thinking is so basic to our lives, and we need some more thinking in the world on all sorts of things that are driven by unjustified opinions. My opinion.
Yeah, I like that. And well, for me, it's about exploring perspective. And I believe perspective is power. And the more views you have on the truth, trying to find a truth is helpful. I don't know that we can, on some topics, find one truth. Perhaps on some topics we can, and maybe that's the essence of megaceps, that there's some general principles that we can boil down to or filter down to that will help us in our thinking. So what I'm hearing from our conversation is that we need to trust our own brains a little bit and to mine that first to see what's there, just cough it up as a way of exploring and use other people then to add some more content and context and linkages in before we then leverage technology to filter it. My next question for you, that's which is bubbling up, is you said earlier there might be 3 topics on the book. Don't go and read those books because you might over stimulate or over input your brain. And as an author, both you and I are both authors. I'm like, well, where does this leave room for books then, if they can be easily reduced to core principles? Is there still a purpose for a deeper dive on a topic? As authors, we hope so. But what's your thinking around that?
And I'm incredibly impressed that you're an author multiple times. I'm still trying to be that once. So congratulations. Let's take 2 wildly different examples of books. Let's take the Bible, which is 1,200 pages, 100,000 plus words, and say that's the main core of Christianity. And let's take a book on a subject you brought up, or I brought it up, interpersonal relationships. The most famous book on that topic is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It was written in 1935, and it sold 40 million copies. It's the Bible of interpersonal relationships. If you take those 2 examples and say, now apply the megasteps to what's in the Bible, you end up with the 10 Commandments.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not saying that's the total content of the Bible, but those would be the megasteps that you derive from reading the Bible if you apply the process. That's in theory.
Okay.
Most people couldn't do that, but Moses did, and it did a pretty good job. Now take the Carney book. One of the examples in the book is about a person who is an engineer and can't get advanced to management. He wants to become a manager, and he goes to his manager and says, how do I become a manager? What are my limitations? Why aren't I being promoted? And basically, the manager tells him his interpersonal skills, ability to relate to and manage people, is not what they need to be. So the manager says, I have a book. If you read it, and then from it write down the megasteps, the 10 greatest thoughts that you have from reading it, and then talk to 2 or 3 other people that have read it and get their ideas, and then do a little research on the book Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, from all the infinite stuff that's been written about it, and then write down your final thoughts. So that's a live example in the book, in my book, that says those 2 things are compatible. You can read a book or 2 or 3 if you want, and it's a little more focus, makes sense. So I don't know if I answered the question, but literally the process works for taking a fairly complex book on a pretty complex subjects, interpersonal relationships and interpersonal skills. One of the great things about the mind that a scientist from MIT in 1952 came up with was your brain and your knowledge and your skills aren't just analytical skills like math and science. And there are 9 in his circle of intelligences. And the one that is probably the least developed in the world, that there's a singular one that's so important, is interpersonal. And so he ended up with 9 megasteps, greatest thoughts on interpersonal, and he applied those, and he religiously followed them, and he got promoted. Now, I'll stop. I'm being too verbose, but I think your point is right on.
Well, what I've heard in your answer is that there's still a place for books. What I'm not convinced of is that in the process that we need to turn to the definitive texts on X topic, because then it's fraught with what are the definitive texts on X topic. Just because a book sold 40 million copies doesn't mean it's a great book. If you take, for example, 50 Shades of Grey, it sold a lot of books, and it's not the definitive text on interpersonal relationships, let's put it that way. It is a testament to somebody who had a very large marketing budget and pushed it really hard. Now, I'm not sure that this compares exactly to the longstanding, well-validated text of How to Win Friends and Influence People, but I think that that's a problem in the process. What are the definitive texts on X topic? I'm just going to put my opinion. I haven't done a megastep process on this. Is that I probably err more on read more widely, read more broadly, absorb more information, to get as many diverse perspectives as possible, as opposed to the definitive version of that, because I think that the definitive version is fraught with issues as well. So I'd love to read an author who is not well known, has got a different point of view, as opposed to the author that has been well celebrated for yonks. How do you think? What's your response to that?
I think you've got a point. You know, simple can be powerful. Complex can be impossible. And so I try to keep the steps simple, and I try to keep the concept of megasteps 10 or fewer. So don't find 50. Probably want more than one, because it's a step in the right direction. If I really thought about your background and intelligence and being an author and being into so many other things in your life, including the podcast, your approach is probably going to be different than the average audience for my book. I mean, I'm not patronizing, but if you take 350 million Americans that just 180 million have voted, that's a pretty complex audience to say there's one right thing to do for all of them. And what I tried to do is dumb it down to the point where anybody, a student in 8th grade that wanted to get some basic additional way to think about things could read it and do it. But I have to respect your point. If you have the intelligence you have and others have, getting more input so that you're not guessing what the best source, and you're actually searching for the best source and using your brain to think through each one. To do that, I think that's appropriate.
Okay.
I would say it's not appropriate for 90% of the people.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, because you're right. As a reader, I'm one of what people call a whale reader. Like, I read a lot, and I think the statistics about the average American reads maybe one book a year. So if you're asking them to read 3 books, that's tripling their input already. So I'll take that on notice. And the second point I will highlight, which I appreciate too from your point of view, is that we don't want to dumb it down. I think what you have done is smarten down the whole process to give a leg up to people to start thinking a little bit better. And the smartening up or smartening down of the process is these 4 steps. So follow that. You're going to be streaks ahead of where you were if you hadn't had that. So I'll take all that. Thank you for that. And now,
that's your point. That there's a famous technology. Pick a complex topic, AI, and they've got 50, 100 books, and it's AI for dummies, and Fortran software for dummies, and operating systems for dummies, and it's caught on in its own parlance and technology, because that's a way to say, well, that's great. They're taking a complex subject, AI, and dumbing it down for those that can really read it and understand it. That's why I use that term, but I'm going to stop using that. You just taught me something.
well, I learned that from my mentor, who said, avoid smarten yourself down, be more simple in your messaging. And I thought,
I'm
wow,
gonna
that's powerful.
I'm gonna plagiarize you on that.
Well, we can plagiarize my mentor, Matt Church, for that one.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Now, Dave, are you ready for the fast three?
Well, I'm ready when you are.
Okay, let's do it. What is the future technology you most want right now?
I, it's going to be trite to say, but I am positively excited about AI, not only as we now know it in the form of like a chat GPT, um, but where it can go. And the reason I'm so excited about it is that it's not just a convenient, I can go search for the best hotels to stay in London for a certain price. That's convenient. It's all impacting potential of AI on whole industries. Um, we had it. I'm on the board of a nonprofit called the Computer History Museum. It's the largest repository of computer artifacts, memories, stories. We have 1,000 entrepreneurs captured on video of how they started their company. It's that, and we always have guests come into the board meetings, and we had the CEO of OpenAI that created ChatGPT come in. He gave his half-hour summary of the good things and the bad things about AI, and it was great. It basically the same presentation he'd made to the U.S. Congress on the subject, and then he opened for questions. And the first question was, "What industry will be most impacted by AI, not only as it exists but as it will exist in the next 3 to 5 years?" And he immediately rattled off the first. He said, "Well, definitely software, because it's huge industry, not just vendors, but users of all different types in the world." And ChatGPT was specifically designed to write code.
Hmm.
And so it's my strong belief that in 3 to 5 years, 90% of all software engineers will not be writing code. They'll be doing something else with their brightness. Well,
Wow.
wow. So I'm the executive chairman of a healthcare company that provides software to use best practices of a medical nature to diagnose and treat patients of all types. And it's all done by the cloud and in the hand of an iPhone or a smartphone or a PC, and it's powerful, and it will be even more powerful next year, the year after, due to AI that can facilitate its use. If you take an industry like healthcare, I think it can be revolutionized for the good of mankind and humankind,
Awesome.
both in lowering costs and improving health. Um, the number three cause of death in the world in the last 10 years has been medical errors.
Yeah. In this
Medical
case, AI
errors.
is a great advancement to hopefully help us with that. So I'm on board with that. Thank you very much. That was question number one. And question number two, what's the best tip you ever got for leadership?
It goes way back, and it was my first job at IBM. I had a wonderful manager who was a student of leadership, um, and he was a prophet believer in participative leadership, and you can read a bunch of books on that type of leadership versus others. And participative leadership basically says that you know more brains are better than one, and the way you get those brains coalesced into the best decisions on a topic or best thinking is to participatively involve them in decision making in leadership. And so as CEO of 4 companies and as a coach to 22 other CEOs, I've tried to not only practice that, but preach it and teach it, because some leaders don't think you're tough and you're a real leader if you do it participatively. But if you take the time to do it that way, you'll be a better leader, and your whole team will be better. So that would be that's more than a tip, but that's changed my entire career. that
Awesome.
tip.
That's a good one. Thank you. Collaborative leadership practice or consultative or both. Sounds great to me.
Participative, all those words.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll take all of them. Okay. Question number 3 is, what are you reading or listening to right now?
I'm reading, well, let me see. I'm listening to all the things I can find that bear on my first answer. And that is, I don't want to learn about how AI works. I don't know with the chipsets underneath that drive it. I don't know exactly how the inner makings of ChatGPT work. I want to have a little more futurist input from people who study it, and understand those views on implications to industries, businesses, society. And there's no book on that. You need to search for that. I'm blessed in my life to have many sources of individuals who are also interested in that, and so we share things. And I know that's again pretty trite, but I think we're in a revolution that's unlike any we've ever had before in the world. And that's the implications positive of AI on society and on industries. Just take education, the potential to get better educated people at all levels through the use of AI vehicles is just enormous. And I just feel a need to understand that better, because I think it's so important to the world.
I agree. Well, thank you for that, Dave. That was the Fast 3.
I'm sorry for being so slow.
It's often the fast-ish 3, but that's excuse me. Sometimes that's the host as well. Oh, a little tickle in my throat there. Dave, where can people find out more about you and your book, Mega Thinking?
You can go to Amazon and put in Mega Thinking, and you'll on the Amazon site, they'll show you the book cover and my bio and that sort of thing. A more complete site is my website, which is www.megathinkingbook.com, megathinkingbook.com. And it has the same stuff that's at Amazon, but it has more in-depth discussion of some of the things that we just talked about. Right now, there's six blog posts that drill into many of the things you mentioned, and try to do it in a page or two so that it doesn't overwhelm people. So I'd probably start with the website, because on the website you can also get the link to Amazon. So it's a double header.
That sounds great. Megathinkingbook.com. Thank you so much, Dave. This has been great. I've loved the mega thinking process that we've talked through. It's been quite enlightening. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's been my pleasure, and you've given me some really good tidbits to integrate.
On Read to Lead today, it is Dave Martin's book, Mega Thinking. I always want to think Megasaurus, but Mega Thinking. And the tagline is a simple, powerful process to think smarter and make better leadership decisions. And don't be fooled by how straightforward and simple this process is, as you saw in the interview with Dave. It basically says this is the way to go about doing that. Capture your own thoughts on whatever topic it is that you're interested in, socialize it, workshop it, share it, discuss it with a handful of people that you trust to get more input and perspectives. Then do some research and then boil it all down into the mega steps on that particular topic. Sounds pretty straightforward, doesn't it? And yet it takes a little bit of effort to stop and distill your own thoughts before then talking about it with others. There's much that we can expound upon with this, but I think the mega thinking, where did it go? Mega thinking, its value as a book is not only explaining that process in detail, but workshopping it through various different lenses that applying the learning. And it's great to see it in a personal context, such as the mother of teenage kids, or applying it to how can I be a better manager and leader. So you get showcase that or walk through that in the book to get some really good outcomes to show you how easy and profound it can be. So do it. That's it for the show today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you will apply your learning. That's the most important thing. And go and share the ideas you got from this book with someone else. Try and remember the 4 steps of mega thinking or the far, deep, and wide principles I also shared. And this will help cement it and help activate your own brain and improve your own leadership. So do something with it. Aside from that, click subscribe in the app that you're listening to. Become a podcast insider. Go to my website, zoerouth.com, click on podcast. As a podcast insider, you will get a summary of this episode. You will get the implementation tip sheet. You will get some discussion questions to run with your team to apply it even further. And the water cooler factoids, yes, to make you look even smarter than you already are. I would love to hear from you. Drop a comment in any of the socials where you're listening. Share this episode. Send me an email, zoe@zoerouth.com. It makes it more of a conversation and it expands my perspective by hearing from you. I would love to hear from you. In the meantime, live with grace, live in service, live well, lead well.